well, sharpen your pencils, set up those dice, and free your mind, because we're about to build an open world. Hello, my name is Knox Adams, my pronouns are he, him, and I am the archivist for Open World. And I just want to let you know that I love you. Here on Build an Open World, we create diverse characters, accessible places, and supportive things that you can use as inspiration or even take directly and use in your own fantasy RPG worlds at home. Today, our guest is Brad. Brad, please introduce yourself, tell us your pronouns, and what is your experience with tabletop RPGs?
All right. Hi, my name's Brad. Pronouns are he, him, and I'm on the border of Treaty 6 and Treaty 7 territory in Alberta. So, yeah. Experience with tabletop RPGs. I think the very first, like what I would call like a tabletop RPG that I ever played was Hero Quest. It's like really old school. It's basically like the combat from like a D&D or whatever on a board with a little modular furniture, and it's kind of a disaster, but it was really fun, especially for, back in the 90s kind of thing. And yeah, since then, playing a lot of D&D. Currently, I have 2 campaigns going, and the one I've actually got ongoing on Discord text only. Me and a friend just like we take turns DMing, and we back and forth. We'll run an adventure for the other, and we just do it all over text. And you type it in to roll dice, and we're using Discord. We're using D&D's. But like the D&D Beyond service actually has a app that integrates into Discord, so you can pull in your character sheet.
Oh, cool.
And so like, when you need to like check initiative, you just type check initiative, and then it rolls out of your character sheet your values.
Oh, that's perfect.
It's so handy. So yeah, like literally I'm running a campaign on my phone when I'm at work or at home or in the grocery store or whatever. So that's been fun. And our party is 2 down on their luck people who tried multiple careers and couldn't get anything to work, and now they're exterminators, and they just go into like sewers and kill bullywogs and stuff like that.
I love that.
It's pretty fun.
Amazing. So then one of the question that I asked you a little bit to think about was, what is a defining quality, characteristic, or identity that you feel is lacking or non-existent in the fictional worlds that you inhabit as either the creator or player?
Well, so the kind of where the idea for me came when you asked this question was in my one campaign, my character, one of the little kind of traits I'm trying to experiment with and thought it'd be interesting to kind of more flesh out fully is they have a like substance dependency, you could say. In this instance, it's like a magical substance dependency, and it's sort of a part of that character, but I feel like it'd be more interesting to kind of flesh it out more fully as part of their person or that kind of thing.
Yeah, so together, me and Brad are going to create a character and a backstory that incorporates that element. Before we get into the build, please remember to take a minute to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts, follow us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts to be kept up to date on the latest additions to this open world. Just a disclaimer before we get started, during our discussion today, there's a good chance that we will discuss topics that we are not experts on or identities that we might not identify with. We are coming from a place of openness and respect, but if we don't get something quite right, please reach out to us on social media, and I will add an edit or amendment to the post on the website about this episode. We are open to learning and growing here.
Yeah, I am very happy to admit that I am not a content expert on this at all. And if I'm wrong, please tell me, and I will apologize.
Yeah. Can I get you to roll a D6?
I got a 5.
5? Okay. So we are going to make an NPC. So can you roll a D100?
93.
We are going to make a Lizardfolk.
Perfect.
No, yeah. Instead of a background, let's just do a job.
Okay, perfect.
So yeah, do another D100.
I got a 19.
19. Carpenter.
Lizardfolk Carpenter, all right.
Most people go right to age first.
Right.
As it's like, okay, let's get an idea of where this person is
kind of
in
where
their
they're
life so that they can identify other aspects around that.
Perfect.
So this is not a specific 33 age. This is are they a child? Are they a youth? Are they young adult, middle-aged, senior, elderly? Where do they kind of fit?
I would imagine this Lizardfolk is like kind of late in their like carpentry career. Like they've been doing it for a while. They're like, it's not that like, trope of like they're one day from retirement, but like
So
they're
like
near the end of their
late middle age.
late middle age, like 50s.
Let's go over to body size. Let's start trying to visualize this character.
On the lower end of the average height scale.
Lower.
You could say just lower than average height.
Than average.
Because I'm assuming, if you took a population sample of 100 lizard folk, this one would be in the bottom shorter. 30%. Yeah, shorter. Exactly. Okay. And as a career carpenter, they're sturdier built. They got some muscle use from repeat tasks.
Probably like big building. Arms.
Yeah, big, like kind of blacksmith-ish kind of physique, but not
maybe
as
triangle, a bit more triangle shape.
Yeah, exactly.
They skip leg day a little too much. As we know, sex and gender identity are different.
I want to give credit, but I don't know where I heard this idea originally, probably from someone on Instagram, but the idea of like gender and sex, and especially with like jobs around like an NPC carpenter, is like how often are this person's genitals going to be a factor of their job?
Right.
And for most people, it should hopefully be very, very minimally, if at all, right? And so again, it's like it doesn't matter.
Right.
Yeah.
Completely agree.
Okay. Yep.
So then their gender identity, how do they identify their gender?
As my brain's running, it's just like, it's interesting to be like, okay, how do I break from like the normalized mold of the world we live in, right?
Right.
Because I'm assuming I'm coming from a context that's in Alberta, that's conservative, like culturally and like religiously conservative. I'm like, okay, probably if someone were a carpenter, they'd probably want to at least identify and pass as more mask, because that's how they would be more likely accepted in that trade. But that's just in the context in which I'm coming from.
Right.
And that's not the context of this character, right? And so
right. And the thing is, what I love about this is that the context that we live in sees certain people needing to be something.
Totally.
Because of their job, or because of what they do, or what they have done, or blah, blah, blah. Doesn't have to exist in...
Absolutely.
But it's also, we can make this character very masculine, cisgender male, if we want to. It's just we have to make it a conscious and intentional choice, not a default because it should be that way.
Because that's the way it is. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Have a rationale besides they just are, because I feel like I've been wanting to, like, one of my most recent encounter or adventures I've been running with some friends, I'm trying to play as a femme character, specifically because it has not been my experience as a person who's cis passing my whole life, right? And so it's interesting to try and understand other people by trying to, I guess, role play in their shoes in a sense, right?
Right.
Gender identity, let's do femme.
So would they identify as femme?
Yeah.
Cool. Because that it doesn't feel as, even though they very well could also identify as female, I like that it's not like the standard binary of it. Mm-hmm. Like, it's kind of like, oh, I'm femme, I'm more feminine.
Yeah.
But they're not saying I am female.
Female, yeah. Oh yeah, it's a spectrum. Absolutely, it's not a A/B. It's a vast sliding scale, and it's great.
Kind of attached, but again, different gender expression. So if they are identifying as femme, do you think that they are also presenting femme?
My mind goes two ways. One being like they are intentionally, I mean, how do I describe this in a way that's not tropey, but like they're almost like impractically feminine in their presentation, especially as a carpenter. And that just kind of creates some difficulty for them. Like they're always in like heels and a dress, but they're like on a roof, and they're like,
okay.
But like, is that become too tropey and like,
well, I think kind of as slapstick long as it's in not, a way, right? As long as it's not hypersexualized.
Yeah.
I feel like that's important. You can be feminine without being hypersexual.
A bit of the illustration for this thought is that I'm reading through the Full Metal Alchemist manga during COVID downtimes. And one of the characters in it is like, and I don't know if this is a good expression to use or not, but kind of like that like boss lady kind of descriptor. Like she's like a mom, and she's like works at a butcher shop, and she's a very normal person, but she dresses very like feminine, but she also is like super kick-ass.
Right.
Like she in one of the scenes I was just reading the other night, like she rolled up in like a nice dress and slippers and just like beat the crap out of like 12 people kind of thing, right? And you're like, that's rad.
Yeah.
Because she can be very feminine and also very strong while still being feminine. It doesn't have to be like aggressive, macho, but female but feminine, right? Like it's, so.
This is one of my favorite shows, so this is what's making me think of it, but Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
Yeah.
Like, she, even though
totally feminine,
she's very feminine. She goes. Sometimes she'll go through like the graveyard with like a furry beanie and like I don't know, like it's all these things where it's. And again, there are some times where she is sexualized in the show.
Yeah.
But there's also sometimes when it's like it's super 90s fashion that is like ridiculous.
Oh yeah.
But it's not sexualized either. So I feel like that we can totally make like a hyper femme kick-ass girl.
Yeah. Like I'm imagining like a really nice dress and then like a tool belt over top of it kind of thing, right?
Yes. Because it's like kind of practical enough to get by, but not practical enough to meet other people's standards.
Yeah, everyone's kind of like, is that okay? Sure.
How are we feeling about sexual orientation?
I mean, I guess as an NPC, is it going to be relevant?
I know this from the campaigns I play in. Sometimes the players get overly attached to NPCs and start asking them questions about their life.
So to have it a bit more established,
just enough to, again, like you were saying about sexual orientation, or I mean, like you were saying about sex assigned at birth. Are the NPCs going to ask to see the genitals? Probably not.
Please don't.
But will they say, "Oh, do you have kids? Are you married?"
Right.
Like,
totally. Yeah.
That might come up. So to have to be able to say like, "Oh yeah, here's a picture of my family." And this is my spouse of this particular gender.
Because again, we're talking like a lizard folk, and in a kind of an unestablished fantasy setting could have a lot of different just possibilities in terms of procreation.
Right.
And so like I'm imagining like the idea of kind of like and this is not a weird mental picture to jump to, but like a salmon spawning ground where it's just like they all roll up, they all just do the thing, and then they all leave, and then there's kids, I guess, right? Like I think that could be an interesting, like it's like a more of like a sense for the continuation of their.
But it's not sex for pleasure.
It's not sex for pleasure. It's just like procreation for the sake of increasing children numbers or whatever, population density, whatever. But you could still have a component of there's that function, and then there's a different function that they choose.
I like how this discussion is already kind of world building as we're going, because so I like that like all lizard folk go to this like annual breeding party.
Yeah, there's like a potluck after, like that, right? Like,
everyone throw your keys in. On the off times, like they'll get pregnant. Some of them might get pregnant. Some of them might.
There's
not.
Eggs or something. Who knows? Clutch, and everyone gets like assigned one as they leave or something. Yeah.
But then, like throughout the year, lizard folks are allowed to like
have attachments. And...
I don't know how to describe that, but and I don't know if that whole story arc fits into the sexual orientation section.
It might not. Okay, here's an interesting thing to bring some tension into it. They're in a committed relationship with someone who's not a lizard folk. It's like some other NPC in this town, right? So if say you're encountering this NPC, it's like the bartender or the.
And is that frowned upon? Is that frowned upon by?
Well, and presumably the other individual might have take some issue with this practice that they're expected to partake in every year.
Well, I don't think. Do you think the non-lizard folk half of this relationship is expected to go?
No, the non-lizard folk half is not expected to go.
Right.
But they don't know how they feel about.
But they love this.
They love this person. But there's this part of them that they're like, I don't. How do I just throw it out?
Iffy on the sex potluck. I don't know. That's just one of the words you said. But what is like the breeding?
Yeah,
the
like
yearly breeding.
procreation practices, you could say. I don't know. These are all just ideas that are coming in my head. I'm sorry,
Yeah,
it's
no,
so
and
terrible.
that's exactly what the point of this is. So this is perfect.
And we'll say this person's like attracted to kind of, again, like a strong feminine kind of person.
They are attracted to like people. Okay.
Like someone who's kind of shares that both that sense of like practical hands-on kind of labor and also kind of an interesting fashion choices in that same field work. And so someone who would be kind of more femme presenting as well, they would
Right.
probably be more.
I think I'm going to put homosexual.
Perfect.
Because that feels like they are attracted to someone like themselves. Now that we're at this point, I think we might have enough to try and give this character a name so we can start referring to them.
Just crank up the Lizardfolk generator and let's see what we get.
I'm seeing Vink, Toshz.
Toshz. I like Toshz. Toshz is an interesting one, but like with a Z at the end, that's not pronounced just for,
Do we think that this character has any physical disabilities?
I feel like probably a lifestyle of carpentry would lead to some amount of like physical impediment. I'm not sure. Again, I like this is really where my lack of knowledge is probably showing, but
yeah.
How would you define something that's like a kind of lifestyle, career, especially physical ailment? I'm not sure what kind of category.
Well, it could even just be like chronic pain if they are doing the same motion,
kind of
like hammering and sawing all the time. I don't know what carpenters do. Hammer and saw. I'm pretty sure that's it, right?
The times I've done carpentry, I've done a lot of hammering and sawing, so I think you're close.
I think that's it. What about cognitive disabilities and neurodiversity?
I think yes. I just don't know. Maybe this is a step too far, and I'll apologize for anything I say that's untoward in this regard, but like it's almost like the Lizardfolk sect will say that she came from is kind of almost like a purist, or like they see themselves as kind of a superior kind of grouping, and she didn't quite fit into that same, and so she was kind of marginalized to the edge of it for not fitting into their kind of idealized sense of what a Lizardfolk should be.
So I like where this is going, and I'm almost thinking that she doesn't love all of the extremist, like we're better than other people aspects.
Yeah.
But she still has this like deep connection with Lizardfolk that she
like
feels
the community.
And the community that she feels like she needs to go take part in this yearly
thing
that happens to like really connect her to her people. But she like loves someone else. She has a job that
doesn't quite fit.
And maybe she goes into like the bigger town, like over or something, and that's
away from this kind of
carpenter shop is. But then every year she comes back just to like kind of
build some sense of like stability or where that fits in this. I don't know.
I don't know.
I think a part of that could be that that community sees her as either physically or mentally less than their standard.
Okay.
Is kind of what I'm saying, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she's.
So I'd say let's try and keep any of
the things tied up in their society,
the actions that the character does versus the identities that they
absolutely
have.
Totally. That totally makes a lot of sense.
So I mean, I think we can either leave this one blank right now and possibly come back to it, or we can leave it blank and that's also okay. We're also going back to, this might come into play here, the main thing that you felt was missing.
Yes.
And that was the addiction. Yeah.
And that's the one thing that I'm also trying to be really cautious about, like, how do I classify that, right? Because what would you consider a dependency to be? Is that a mental health thing? Is that a illness?
Also could, it could be either of these ones.
Classified by, like, say, a psychological board of, like, I'm trying to think, like there's that there's like a manual that classifies like psychological issues, like different diagnoses and diseases and stuff like that. I'm not sure where they classify something like a substance dependency, and is that a fair way to
substance use disorder? I think it would be considered a mental health condition. We're going to go substance use disorder. But I also feel like this could make sense with this character, like
in the context. Well, it doesn't have to fully define them,
right? Yes, it's just it's one
a part
aspect
of them.
Of them.
And I think that's an important thing to take away, is like that one thing isn't the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I could see it as like this is a coping mechanism, right? This person clearly has been through trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and this is a way in which they, healthy or not, that's up for debate, they are dealing with their trauma.
Right. I think it's an interesting one to discuss, because a lot of the times we say like somebody who is an alcoholic or drug addiction, you automatically write them off as people who need help.
Yeah.
And it's
and
sorry, go.
No, and that they don't interface with a normalized society until they've gotten that help.
Right.
And they're kind of literally marginalized to recovery homes or centers or those kinds of things. Yeah.
I'm wondering if it's a part of their story and like a major part of who this like character is, but it's not, like you were saying, it doesn't define them solely.
Yeah.
It doesn't, their life is still their own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
They're a successful carpenter. They've got they've got a stable relationship. They have some ties with their community.
That might depend on what the substance is. So do we want to define that? Like you were saying, like, is it a magical element, or is it an element that exists in the real world?
I think being in a fantasy setting, you've got a lot more room to flex with what's possible, right?
Right.
And so you could, again, as people look at this and think about what they want to do with their own thing, like it could be something very much like some kind of magical narcotic, or it could be, I don't know, right? Being teleported to a different plane of existence for a half hour or whatever, right?
Like being put into demi-planes or whatever.
Yeah. Because I'm sure that's quite a trip, I guess, right? Like
maybe we just say like the use of magic directed at them,
specifically for the purpose of like numbing or trying to background.
Like it's not damage dealing spells,
but it's escapism in a sense, which again I'm not saying is bad.
Okay, what do we think about illness?
Something that I think has come from me watching different sci-fi, but like characters that repeatedly get, say, shifted to a different plane have some amount of like, when the term is just like, nope, I'm gone, like some kind of like, motion sickness or travel, like jet lag, essentially, from being...
Probably that motion sickness is kind of like her way of knowing she's back.
Right.
So it's like, once she does this escapism, she's like, when she knows, she's like, she kind of feels nauseous. She's like, okay, I'm back. Like, it's kind of like it's like a magic hangover almost. Race and skin color.
Let's say like a deep red with like kind of more of an orange pattern on her back.
Culture and ethnicity.
The Lizardfolk community being kind of a more conservative, more rural, more isolated group. And then Toshz left that to kind of integrate more with a more like kind of the rest of society, you could say, right? Mm-hmm. And so she's left parts of that behind, but not everything.
Religion and ideology. What are we pulling from in real life? Like, is this a heavy, strict Christian thing that we're kind of pulling from?
Yeah, that's kind of, again, that's kind of the feel I get from this sort of having come from environments that are similar to those. Mm-hmm. Like, this is kind of feels like that sort of thing.
So, how would we define, is it a strict Christian? Doesn't sound like a thing. I feel like I just made that up. I mean, there probably are strict Christians, but I'm trying to think of, it's evangelical?
I mean, yeah. Again, evangelical is quite the spectrum, but it does typically lean towards conservative and like kind of insular, community-minded thinking and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I'm going to get a lot of hate mail from evangelicals now for saying all that. But I mean, I don't know how many listen to your podcast.
Yeah. I don't know how many people listen to my podcast, let alone...
Oh, come now.
Language, accent, or cadence.
There is, again, that like trope tendency to be like, they're all Southerners and they talk like this, right? That kind of backwoods. But like, that's just a trope, and that's not accurate, and that's not, I don't know.
And even if it's so, like, we don't have to pick a specific language or accent, but it's even like, how do you think that this person is talking really fast? Do you think they're like always, like you were saying, they're like a kick-ass boss lady? Is it like they're trying to get stuff done all the time? Like they're just
Right.
like they're shooting things off. Like, okay,
Impatient
let's do this, and then they're also just waiting for their next
kind of
hit of escapism magic.
Yeah.
So it's like maybe it's just like a really kind of
impatience. Yeah.
Family status. Do you think they still are like in contact with their birth family, or is it because of how they were raised in this kind of that parents don't exactly have the same?
Yeah, I imagine there's not an easy
dynamic.
way to connect like familial lineage outside of the community, right? Like it's kind of like this community is a community, but there's not direct ties to who's actually your genetic parents and those kinds of things, right? And so it's just kind of like you're in the community or you're not in the community, I guess.
It like literally takes a village.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I probably also imagine the way that their life has gone, like they have a committed relationship, but they haven't been entrusted with a clutch of eggs because of their status with this community. So they don't specifically have their own dependents.
Socioeconomic status. They have a business, so that's
they're entrepreneur.
Upbringing and life experience. I see upbringing more as the like longer term how she was raised. We've kind of gone over this a lot. Yeah. She didn't connect fully with the community. Where I see life experience more as like what are those pivotal moments and turning points?
Yeah, I'm wondering if there's even like some kind of rite of passage that exists that they had. It's kind of like a pass fail sort of thing.
Right,
and they're like exiled if they.
Do you think that maybe she didn't even take it?
Attend?
Like she
was just like skipped.
Because she knew if she failed, she would be shut out
completely.
Where if she just didn't take it, maybe she ends up like, I don't know if this is an incorrect term, but like an old spinster or something like that. Like I don't know if that's a inappropriate term. But yeah, like it's like they're not shunned, but they're not. Yeah, and she didn't want to prove herself, kind of.
Right. Yeah. Or she had moral qualms with the actual act, right? The thing that she was expected to do.
And the last one I have here is privilege. The one again I'm thinking of is just her being like an entrepreneur,
independent, has the ability to meet their own needs. Yeah. Still having ties with the community would also be anything, right? Because not necessarily all of her kin have that same amount of being somewhat welcome back. Yeah.
Right. One more question. If we could adjust an element of traditional fantasy to make the world a more open and accessible place for Toshz specifically, what could we change?
Lead back into sort of the inspiration of this character. Yeah, like removing that stigma of dependency, right?
Yeah, and it's like almost like it's not seen as broken.
It's like this is something this person needs to do to get through the day. Great.
Yeah, it's not seen as a negative.
They have something wrong with them, and therefore it's just
the substances that exist in the world.
Yeah.
In these more open worlds. Are not substances that will do excessive harm to them or others. You know, like they can have a substance disorder, but because of the man-made substances that exist in both the real world and traditional fantasy, they are substances that might very well kill themselves or
they're doing
someone
real
else.
Harm or
where
not
if
regulated
if a regulated substance like maybe certain magic is okay to do and it's not going to
proven to be
that's great. I love it.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's probably where we will call this. As always, you can find a character sheet for individual representation. Whoa, I'm gonna take that again. A visual representation of what we think Toshz may look like at openworldrpg.org/podcast. Also there you can find links to any additional resources we may have used to make this character, or you can find a preview of that information on any of our socials by searching OpenWorld RPG and looking for the D20. Brad, thank you so much for being here today and helping me build a more open world. Is there anywhere that you want listeners to find you online to see what you're up to?
No, I have a terrible track record with social media, so please don't look.
Alrighty. Well,
you'll find nothing is what you'll find.
Yeah, it doesn't exist.
No.
Well, I want to thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week with a new guest helping me create a new character as we continue to build an open world. I love you all!